Today we are here with my colleague Nayo, career advisor at Career Advising and Transition Services. Say hi, Nayo.
Hey, hi everyone. Pleasure to be here.
He will be moderating this session and introducing properly our speaker of the day, our dear John Gradek. But before, we are going to do a land acknowledgement because McGill University is on land which has long served as a site of meeting and exchange amongst indigenous peoples. We respect their territory and we'll start this session with a land acknowledgement. So please, we appreciate if you stay muted while we play the video.
But please turn on your cameras. We love to see your faces, and we're starting to record now. Fantastic. So Deanna, if you want to help me with the waiting room, I know in this account we can remove it. So hey, hi Hilan, hi Frank. Thank you. Let us start with this land acknowledgement video. So here it is. We're going to be seeing the live. Here, Facebook Live. That's not. Sorry about that. Share sound. Well, this was only a short video. Again, there is a lot of information and a lot of things to learn about the culture of people who are here, the communities who are here before us, and we strongly encourage you to go and look for wherever you're located. We're talking about the future of mobility, so people all over the world find about on which lands you are and which community was there. So, as my colleague just said here, my name is Nayo Gariepi. I'm a happy career advisor in the incredible Career Advising and Transition Services team, also known as CAT. And yeah, my colleague here, Deanna, she introduced herself. She's also the one who did the fantastic promotional video you see around on social media. So thank you so much for being here with me, Deanna. Now, as we said, the video is recorded. It's also going live, but we encourage you to share whatever you learned today with the rest of your peers, colleagues, family, anyone else. The more people who know, the better it is. And now let's introduce our guest of honor. So someone I greatly admire. So John is fascinated by humanity's abilities to recognize and adapt to evolving technologies and environments. He has a career path that permits an appreciation of the impact of change events. From the political to the technical to the environmental to human relationship to academia, John Gradek has demonstrated his ability to synthesize and apply learnings to change initiatives across a broad spectrum of endeavors. So yeah, please warmly welcome John. Your turn, John. Oh, sorry, you're muted.
See, I follow my instructions. When you tell me to mute, I mute. I mute. All right. So thank you very much for the introduction. Much appreciated. So I'm John Gradek. I'm a faculty lecturer at the School of Continuing Studies at McGill, and I'm also the program coordinator of a few programs at the school. I've got the international or the integrated aviation program. I'm also the program coordinator for supply chain, logistics, and operations management. So a few different hats that I'm wearing, and it's an interesting place to be in 2021 for a variety of reasons. And the reason we're talking about mobility today is because it really is something that I consider that an umbrella definition of the stuff that I teach and I manage. So it really is about, how do we move stuff? How do we move people? And how do people get from point A to point B to point C? And what is it about the world that we know today in mobility and what we've experienced, particularly over the last 18 months, that kind of causes us to kind of challenge the traditional way that we see mobility? So if I look at what we've defined in the past as mobility, people tend to look at mobility from a pretty narrow perspective, and they look at your car, and they look at trains, they look at buses, they look at airplanes to go in longer distances. But it really is about trying to get people to either get to visit places, to go to work, to visit friends, and to do shopping, and to get their regular amenities set up. And how do you what modes of transportation do you actually use to accomplish the tasks and the wishes that you and your family might have to get from point A to point B? So mobility has traditionally been one where you're trying to, as a planner, as a person who's designing and who's investing money into supporting the infrastructure required to promote those mobility services, there's been a lot of challenges as a result of COVID-19 to that environment, to that domain. And so the one thing that really sticks out when people talk to me about mobility in COVID-19 times and post-COVID-19 is that people behavior, people's needs, and the people's way of consuming mobility has changed significantly. So if you in fact look at bus ridership, you look at public transit ridership, whether it's in the subway, on LRTs, on light rail transit, you see behaviors changing. You see the way people react and the way people tend to distance themselves, and the way in which they touch things, and the way in which they basically tend to, we all wear masks, of course, at this point in time. And we're trying to figure out, what does all of that stuff really mean to the future of what mobility might look like in the future? And the other side of the coin, we see more and more vehicles coming out that are electric, more and more vehicles that are autonomous, and that's not necessarily road, but also air. So you have autonomous air vehicles, autonomous road vehicles. You see a lot more interest into alternative fuels, whether those alternative fuels are hydrogen-based, whether they're electric-based, whether they're biofuels, whatever they are. There's a lot of things happening around the world, and I tend to give credit where credit is due, and I have to credit, I'm going to credit Greta Thunberg for some of that. Greta's been a vocal participant in the world of sustainability, and being a teenager, and she's been able to mobilize, to everybody's surprise, mobilize governments around the world to basically take more attention to dealing with sustainability within the world of mobility. So sustainability and mobility are going to be two topics I'm going to come back to as we evolve our hour here today. But it really is about, what is it that we have to look at in terms of designing and dealing with mobility? What are those things that are happening in the world of mobility that we, as teachers, and you as learners, and application and people who apply the technologies that we're talking about, have to in fact recognize as being part of the way in which we will design and operate future mobility systems. So for those of us living in Montreal, and we all understand that Montreal has got a pretty interesting profile when it comes to understanding where mobility is going, we have some examples of organizations and infrastructure investments going on that try to define what the new world of mobility ought to look like, or should look like, or is evolving into. So those of you that have been seeing the REM infrastructure being thrown up across the island of Montreal, and off the island of Montreal as well, excuse me, you're seeing, a significant amount of investment, billions of dollars worth of investment by a non-traditional organization called the Caisse de dépôt, who is in fact investing, close to $10 billion, if not a bit more, maybe a bit more if you include the REM East. But they're investing $10 billion plus into creating a new mode of mobility into the city of Montreal and for all Montreal residents and Greater Montreal and the island. So you have to ask yourself the question, is this a good thing? Are they doing it the right way? Have they in fact really understood the world of future mobility and potentially the impact of COVID-19 and its health measures with respect to what the design and operating characteristics will be of the REM? And my analysis and my answer to the question is no, they have not. The REM has been built and designed around an environment that was pre-COVID, has got a very different set of operating practices and product designs that might have to get changed or probably will get changed as the closer we get to actually operating the line. So it really is a dynamic world that we live in. What was in fact planned, what was designed, and what was invested in the last 10 years might need to get revisited in terms of its design characteristics in order to meet the future demands of mobility. One of the other aspects of mobility that I thought would be interesting to chat about this morning is really the ethics of mobility and mobility as a human right. It's a touchy subject because we really haven't talked about it much in terms of designing mobility platforms. So we talk about things like Teslas, Teslas that are out there and automotive vehicles that are electric and everything else. But these vehicles are $50,000, $60,000, $70,000. They're not made for everybody. And we talk about trucks that are $400,000, $500,000. They're not available to any producer of transportation. So it's still very much an elitist product. It's one that really is catering to a very small segment of human population in need of mobility. So the question you have to ask yourself, and we will be asking the question in our programs, what is it that people need in terms of mobility? And how do we in fact create the mobility platforms and the infrastructure required to ensure that we are in fact creating mobility as a basic human right, something that everybody's entitled to. And there are a lot of thinking going on around it. And there are a few organizations around the world that have decided to take the initiative and consider transport as a basic human right. So there are organizations in Europe, and I would say my friends in Scandinavia are probably the ones that are probably as leading edge as it can be, that have basically said public transit, free, no charge. You can get from point A to point B to point C within a certain geographic area, metropolitan area, no charge. And it is a public service. It is a public right, a human right to get anywhere within this territory and not charge people for it. Because transportation, mobility, the ability to get from point A to point B is an undeniable human right. Now, would that work? Might just work. Might just work. Question is, of course, who pays for it? Who builds the infrastructure? How do people, get a return on investment when it comes to putting up that infrastructure? Our friends at the CDPQ, the Caisse de dépôt, who are building the $10 billion plus REM, have got a 40-year contract with the city of Montreal to basically design, build, operate, and maintain, and by the way, get revenue from the REM in order for them to pay back the investment that they're making in that infrastructure called the REM. So they will be making money. They will charge you. They will charge you $2.50 to get on the REM. They'll charge you $5 to get from I think they haven't really finalized it, but there's rumors going around that to get from the west end of Montreal out near Beaconsfield and Point Clear to get to the South Shore, as an example, which will take you 35, 40 minutes versus an hour and a half by car if you're really lucky. And they'll charge you $4, $5 for trip, one way. So it's not going to be for free. It's not going to be there. But I think we have to start asking the question, and we have to start, having a debate among ourselves and among politicians and among different, public transit or the authorities about, is there a need for us to create a basic human right of transportation within the city of Montreal, within any city in North America, within any global city? And how do we manage it? How do we do it? How do we pay for it eventually? And how do we build it? How do we finance it? How do we maintain it? So those are very, very interesting questions, and they're questions that I think deserve a debate and deserve a dialogue, and hopefully we'll be able to kind of push that dialogue and that conversation through sessions such as this one, and potentially with our politicians as we move towards an election this November. Maybe we'll start something. Maybe we'll ask mayoralty candidates such as Madame Plante, as mayoress today, and Denis Coderre and some of the other candidates that may show up. What is it that's stopping us from considering free public transit in this country and in Quebec? And yeah, so there are a number of people that we can engage in a dialogue. So don't be surprised if you see me showing up on your daily news once in a while, as I do in aviation. But I'll probably do it. I'll probably get out there and give a little bit of a shot to our politicians to say, let's have a conversation about mobility, public transit as a basic human right that basically is there as something that we have. Healthcare is a basic human right. Transportation should be a basic human right. And let's move forward on that one. So that's another issue. The other one I want to talk about very quickly is subject close to my heart, which is aviation. And I'm trying to understand, well, how does aviation fit into mobility? And what does aviation do within mobility, and how does it evolve? And I think that there's a couple of facets of aviation mobility that we got to really look at. Organizations around the world are trying to figure out what is it that, the next generation of sustainable technology aircraft are going to look like. And everybody's basically jumping on a bandwagon to talk about electrics. So you have electric airplanes, you have hydrogen powered airplanes, you have sustainable aviation fuel airplanes that reduce significantly the carbon emissions from airplanes. But the one big challenge to mobility, and I'll consider mobility in two aspects. Mobility short haul within the city of Montreal as an example. Is there a market for people to in fact look at using electric short haul vehicles as an airborne vehicle to get from point A to point B? Is there a market for us to use these same type of vehicles to move product and to move goods within the city of Montreal and get trucks off the road and basically deliver products via, air? And is that something that's feasible? Is that something that could be done? Is that something there's a demand for? Have we got the technology to do it? So that is another debate that's going to go on in terms of how do we decongest in our cities? How do we, do we keep building roads? Do we keep building parking lots? Do we keep bringing in, all of these different multifaceted lane structures and lane designs and integrated transportation systems, intelligent transportation systems, smart cities to accommodate more and more vehicles? Or do we in fact take a vision of saying, enough of these vehicles? Enough. What is it that we have that we can create an alternative way of getting goods mobile into where people need to have those products available for sale? And I think that is one domain that is really going to be interesting to see. I know my friends in London, England, when you want to drive into London, England, to downtown London, England, be ready to pay. Paris, be ready to pay. They have basically said, we're tired of the city being in a constant state of congestion. New York, on the agenda, same thing. We're tired of basically looking at people driving into the city, congesting the city, high carbon emissions, all of those goods, and trucks. And if you drive on St. Catherine Street, any one given time during the day, and you'll see double parked trucks all over the place. And there's no room, there's no back alleys, there's no other way to access it other than on St. Catherine Street. So really, we need an alternative way to deliver goods, potentially people, into urban domains that are congested, that have limited space and have lots of places in order for people to work into and sell and deliver stuff to. So that's another area of mobility that we're going to be focusing into at McGill in terms of our continuing studies programs, and to give you a chance to kind of learn from the best and understand from the practitioners that we have out there in terms of some of the ideas that are out there. So now I've raised some issues, some topics, some controversial, others not so much, but and that's what I do. That's my job, is basically to get people to start thinking and to start challenging themselves in their own thinking about what it is that we should be doing in terms of trying to define, what mobility really means. So if you have any questions, if you have any topics that you think, I haven't addressed, or you want to, see if you want to further push my my mindset in terms of ideas about mobility, please be my guest. Fire away.
Fantastic here. So I'm going to let, of course, if anyone wants to speak up, priority is always to whoever has the courage to ask the question themselves. If not, I did receive 3 questions in the chat, and we had a few ones from the registration, of course. So just to give the chance, just raise your hand and I'll let you speak, or continue sending them to me privately. So one that is the closest to what you were talking here, and you already covered it. So just to see if you have anything additional, do you think the after effects of the COVID pandemic will affect our use and need of transportation?
Oh, I think, like I said, it's really affecting the underlying design of what public transit's all about in terms of what mobility is about. I think that people are, as much as we've got the vaccination programs coming along and managing our expectations of what the new normal is going to look like, we're not going to go back to 2019. There's no way. There is no way we're going to have that same environment that we lived in the first 9 months of 2019. That will not happen. We've raised the bar in terms of what the basic human need is for protection of people's lives. People are much more comfortable today wearing masks, washing their hands, social distancing, all the things that we've said are the underlying tenets of what it is that we have to do in terms of managing the spread of COVID-19. And that is not going to go away. Why will it not go away? Because the world is not vaccinated. The number of people left to go through a vaccination program, billions, not tens of thousands, not hundreds of thousands, not 1 or 2 million like in Quebec. It's billions of people around the world, are a situation where vaccinations are going to take a long while to get there. And so when people ask me, well, what about air travel? And, we connect the world. You can get anywhere in the world you want today within 24 hours. Anyway, so I can fly to Antarctica and be in Antarctica on the South Pole within 24 hours from Montreal. I can be in Montreal. I want to be in Swaziland, in Central Africa, 24 hours. I want to be on the beach in Fiji, 24 hours. So as much as we can access the world in 24 hours, the world can access Canada within 24 hours. So the world is a big place, and there's lots of people that basically have got vaccinated or planning to get vaccinated, but also a lot of people weren't. And until such time as the world, all traveling public is in fact vaccinated, we are going to be in a constant state of alertness, and COVID-19 precautions and COVID-19 quarantines passports, vaccination passports, all of those things will be in place. So yeah, your fundamental right for air travel will be changed, or has changed, and will continue to change. And notwithstanding what we see in terms of the debacle in the U.S., with everybody traveling in the U.S. these days, there are still quarantine measures in the U.S. There are still masks in the U.S. There are still requirements for you to, in fact, be vigilant and get vaccinated, double vaccinations. So it's not over yet, and it's going to be there for quite a while. And guess what? You think COVID-19 is it? COVID-20 right around the corner, and that's where we have to say to ourselves, these are behaviors, these are situations where we're going to have to, in fact, deal with this not as a if cause, it's a when cause. It's going to happen again and again and again. And the question is, how do we, in fact, mitigate the risk that we are taking with respect to continuing to do what we do in terms of sustainability and destroying the environment and doing all those things that we tend to create in terms of climate change. And so there's a need for us to really, as in the aviation side particularly, understand that COVID-19, it's not over yet. We're there for a while yet. So, and then in public transit as well, in terms of even in the city of Montreal, you get on a bus. You get on the 165, right? Everybody knows what the 165 is. I took that bus for a number of years, and I go through Cotonou. And that 165 can be pretty busy, can get pretty nasty in terms of numbers of people on board. And people have got a great deal of trepidation getting on a very crowded bus, and people tend to cower in those buses. People tend to cower in the subway. At 5 o'clock, well, it's not too bad now, but wait, when people start going back into downtown, you're going to have people who are going to be on crowded subway platforms, whether you're a Guy, you're Atwater, or Gare de Montagny, that, people are going to say, whoa, do I really want to be here? And whether or not we have masks is going to be a different story. So there's a lot of concern about people, going through and reacquiring some of those old habits. Those old habits are going to be something that people are going to have to be questioning. And that's why you have people today questioning. You want to force me to go back to work? And you're telling me I have to go back to work 5 days a week? And people are saying, I don't think so. I think I'd rather take my chances and stay home and work from home. And if you can't provide me with the opportunity to work from home, guess what? Other companies will. And you'll have a lot of people, and I'm not going to give a percentages because it's kind of meaningless at this point in time, but you have a lot of people out there who are asking the question. My employment is important to me. I need a job. I got to pay the bills. I got to pay the rent. I got to feed my family. But, at what risk? What are those things that I'm taking as a risk? And that's becoming a greater and greater concern, a greater and greater part of the equation that people are asking themselves, does public transit, does mobility, offer me enough security and enough safety and enough caution for me to feel comfortable in doing the things that my employer is asking for me? And then if I have a choice of employer, and most people in today's environment do have a choice, I'll be looking for employment and it's with an employer that allows me to, in fact, not only worry about work-life balance, but also ensures that I'm operating in an environment where I can control the elements around my work environment and subsequently my health. Hopefully that helps.
Wow. So whoever
open-ended question, get some open-ended answers. Trust me, Nayo.
Anyone else who wants to do follow-ups here? So just want to see if the question here is a follow-up. Do you think the potential? Okay. So before going to the question of Greg, which is an awesome question here, I'll just go with Vince. And again, we had a few other ones in the chat. So do you know why there is free public transport in Europe? What is supporting it? Who is providing the funds? And is it through raising taxes?
Well, it's
a question.
Good question. That could be a course all to itself. We could spend 39 hours dealing with those questions. So I'm going to give you the 5-minute Cole's Notes version of it. It's it's not for the faint of heart. Like I mentioned to you earlier, our Scandinavian countries and cities, have been the first to really go out there and try the model. I think Antwerp and Brussels are trying it. And yeah, it's not cheap. And it's something where municipalities have gone to the population and said, this is an idea. What do you think? And overwhelmingly, the answer is yes. Let's do it. And then the question now is, okay, where do we find the money to finance it and to operate it? And it's going to come from taxes. It's going to come from them. It's going to come from people. It's going to come from you and me, directly or indirectly. It will happen. And the question that you have to ask yourself, what specific element of taxes are we going to be paying for this? Is it going to come out of sales tax? Is it going to come out of income tax? Where's it going to come from? And that's what people ask. Don't give me another tax. Don't give me a mobility tax. Don't give me a public transit tax, even though we're paying for it if you get your license, your driving license in the province of Quebec, or your plates, I should say. Plates, you pay gas taxes. You pay for the use of your car indirectly, 65 or 75 bucks a year. And that money goes to build infrastructure. So would you complain much if we said we're going to take 1% of your personal income tax and say that's going to be earmarked towards free public transit in the city of Montreal? And then do we want to get Montreal residents to pay for that? Or do we get Laval, South Shore, off the island? People in Quebec City going to pay for that tax for the city for free transit in Montreal? I don't think so. So there's some political thinking that people are going to have to go through. My personal opinion is that by 2030, public transit in Montreal will be free. Whether or not Mayor Plante or Mayor-elect Coderre think about it, it will be free. And that won't be because, it's coming out of our, collective glee about public transit, because the world is going to be doing it. The world is doing it, and we don't want to be an outlier. We consider ourselves in Montreal and Canada to be on the bleeding edge of mobility issues. And that's one that's coming fast and furious. And, as electric vehicles, you see what Mr. Biden is doing in the US and saying half the vehicles in the US will be electric by 2030. Trudeau basically says the same thing. Says we need to electrify our vehicles. So as much as we are looking to electrify our vehicles, we will be looking to basically make urban transit and urban mobility for people, at least, free. In a vernacular, free from a cash perspective, not free from the tax perspective.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. I don't know if you wanted to follow up or if that was clear, Vince. Yes, fantastic. Yep. We love the thumbs up. I'm going to go with Greg's question here, and I'm really hopeful that this day will come, of course. So Greg has a long question here, so I'm going to read it quite slowly. So do you see updating the highway infrastructure on the island of Montreal, Île-aux-Tourtes Bridge on Highway 40 on the West Island, the elevated Metropolitan Expressway, an expressway through Ile Perrot connecting the Highway 20 to the 30, and the 401 out west, etc.? A worthwhile investment by the provincial government, or will that only serve to add to congestion problems in the city? Do you think the provincial government considers infrastructure improvements like this a worthy investment?
So I don't know if you've seen the Transport Quebec plan for my favorite piece of highway infrastructure. Happens to be the Metropolitan Boulevard, right? And you look at the Metropolitan Boulevard, and 60 years old plus, supposed to be close to 70. It's getting to be as old as I am. But it's they went through public consultation for about 2 years or 3 years, I think, asking people, residents along the infrastructure and people using that infrastructure and commerce and industrial, what should we do with this piece of highway? It's an important piece of highway, right? And it happens to go through some pretty busy and some pretty interesting territory. And it cuts through the heart of the city, as the Carrie Expressway, as does, the Ville Marie. And so the question was asked of people, do we in fact rebuild the Met as it is currently situated, which is upper structure with some ground level structure from P&F East or whatever. Do we do all ground and none of this aerial stuff? Or do we keep the aerial, fix the aerial? Or do we basically shut it down? Shut it down completely, and everybody that transits through the city of Montreal use city streets, and we in fact take the 40, we extend it, or a ring road around the city for transit that's going through the city. And the answer, after 2.5 years, $25 million worth of consultation dollars, let's just tweak it. Let's just fix it. Let's just go in there and repaint it, put some cement in there, patch it up, put some more steel rods where the steel rods are all rusted out. But let's keep it aerial and let's keep it there. And yeah, it's going to take us 5 years to do it. So your next headache in the city of Montreal, as the Ville St. Pierre interchange and Turcotte, and for those of us that have lived through it, that was a 5-year, headache. They're going to be doing the same work on the Met. They're going to be doing the same work on the La Fontaine Tunnel. And the next one to get hit is probably going to be the Laurentian Artery. So infrastructure like those which are old, which were built in the 60s, the last time we had a major build program, are falling apart. And so the government is asking the question. So your question about, is the government considering infrastructure as an integral part of the economy? Yes, they are. And they're going to spend billions. And we're going to be inconvenienced for years, if not a decade, by both the tunnel and by the Met. They had the opportunity to go back and rethink it and redesign it and not cause a lot of grief to happen. So the governments are really involved. They really are asking the question. Now they're not getting the answers that I would like to be able to get. I would have loved to see the Met just go flat and just make it a thoroughfare with lights and everything else, and a couple of underpasses and overpasses to make it work. But the Met ground level, and we basically manage the flow of traffic through lights and everything else that we have to do. And we build intelligent automated transportation systems that manage the flow. And lights are synchronized. You've got cutoff lanes, you've got tow truck lanes, you got all kinds of stuff that you can build to make it work. But they said we got 6 lanes on the Met. They were aerial for the last 60 years. The next generation of the Met, aerial, 6 lanes, and good luck with people stalling out on the Met going in either eastbound or westbound directions during rush hour. We're still going to get backed up for miles. Welcome to leading edge thinking in the 21st century.
Thank you. Thank you, John, again for the great question. And thank you for the detailed response, John. Thank you. Fantastic. And here now, I want to stay a little bit on where we are. So I know I've received other questions from other areas. So individual mobility versus collective mobility, where will we go? I feel you also answered that quite well.
Oh, I got some other opinions on that one. Trust me.
Okay, well, there you go. Jump on it.
That'll get me going. No, and it goes back to my REM argument about whether they really thought about REM design pre or post COVID. And so you look at the REM design, you look at the REM stations, and you ask yourself, parking. Where is parking going to be? How do people get to the REM? And they're going to use, the answer is use public transit, use buses. And is that the answer? Is that what you really want to do? Is that what the public really wants? To use a bus to get to an REM? And traditional thinking has been, and you just have to look at the train system that we had in place that was going through all of Montreal and Laval and West Island. 90% of the people were basically using vehicles, whether they're, I call them kiss and drop, people dropping people off, or people parking on side streets and congesting residential streets all around the train stations. And, and there are buses, and people still don't use buses, they use cars. And the question you have to ask yourself, you guys what have you done to address that need for transportation from place of residence to the REM stations? And what have you learned from the train stations that we used to have? And how have you changed the access and egress to those train stations based on what you're designing for the REM? And it's probably, the same answer I typically get when I talk to public transit guys is, well, that's the way we've always done it in the past. We're not going to change. We relied on people to basically use their best effort to use the public transit to get there. But sometimes, if you can't use it, you can't use it. So, get your act together and walk. Okay, January, February, I'm an old guy, so, I'm not going to walk a 1.5 kilometers to get from my house to the REM station. And by the way, there's no bus on my street. So what have you done to kind of aid me in making me feel more comfortable and wanting to use the REM, where I have to either walk, to the train station, walk to take a bus to go to the train station, or take my car and find a parking spot within, 500 meters of the train station. So there really hasn't been much thinking done by the REM in terms of understanding how are you going to design something to change the habits of people around individual mobility. And I'm challenging them left, right, and center. I'm saying I'm living in a condo that's an hour, that's 1.5 kilometers from the REM station, and I haven't got a clue as to how I'm going to get that 1.5 kilometers walk. I don't, in July and August, not a problem. January, February, March, you're going to have to really convince me. So it's about, you're building collective mobility on the REM and with buses. But what's important to people is individual mobility. Get me from my condo to the REM. One stop, no holds barred, just get me there. So the question becomes, when you have to build a layer on top of the REM to basically deal with individual mobility, just to complement the REM. So you've got to basically build an integrated network of vehicles to move people from residential locations to the REM. Is that technology available? Probably is. How close? Year and a half away. And it's autonomous vehicles that I will be able to get on my cell phone as I'm walking out the door, call a vehicle, and it'll come to my door autonomously, pick me up, and deliver me to the REM, coordinated with the REM train schedule. No questions asked. On my phone, get me to the train and minimize my wait time. And you pick me up on my door, deliver me to the train station, pick me up at the train station, bring me back home. Not rocket science. Not a lot of you got to invest it, you got to build it, you got to structure it, you got to manage it, you got to deploy it. But it's not as if we have to go into rocket science. It's not. It's there, and that's missing. That's missing. Again, my job will be to challenge the guys in planning to kind of come in there and think about it, because that's individual mobility. That's basically at a micro level. From my door, getting me to where I want to go. The REM is great, high speed, high frequency. Get me downtown in 12 minutes, perfect. For those of us that keep getting stuck on the Met, getting stuck on the Carry, or getting stuck on the Ville Marie, 12 minutes from my door, from the REM station, Ville Saint Laurent, to McGill. 12 minutes. That's what they say. I haven't tried it yet, but we'll see. But an amazing alternative. The problem is the overhead associated with getting me from my house to the REM. Downtown is not so bad. They built it at McGill, which is 15 or 20 second walk. But it's still a question of last mile, first mile in the way we do things. We do things collectively. We do things around lanes that we've created, however they created those lanes. We don't basically take it to that next level, which is first mile, last mile. And until you get first mile, last mile, We're not going to go to individual mobility. We'll stay at collective mobility and building lanes. And that may or may not be, the ideal way of really addressing mobility. Hope that
Wow.
helps.
That was, again, fantastic. I think a lot of insights coming out of that. And just wanted to say, I don't know if you ever tried the app called Transit. So it's like a green app. It's not perfect, but it does give you like a lot of options to get to point A to point B. One thing that I also do hope, and just quick question, because I don't read that much the news about it. Do you know if the RAM will be connected with each municipality? So as of now, like you have the STM, the STL, and all of the other ones, will it be combined, or you still have to buy individual passes for everywhere you want to go?
It's going to be combined. I think that, that's the design intent. The design intent, you buy a monthly pass, and your monthly pass will cover a geographic area.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're living, I live in Ville Saint Laurent, so my pass will be downtown, and probably the airport to be included if I really push it. Maybe not. Maybe a special fare, but it'll be geographic. So if you've been to Paris and you've been to the Paris metro station and the Paris system, or even London, they are very much distance related. And so you buy a pass and it gives you travel within that certain geographic territory. So when you access the gate at an REM station with your monthly pass, it'll validate the geographic territory that you are embarking on. And when you disembark, you will have to use that pass again to get out. So it'll track origin and destination, and you have your monthly pass will have to cover that combination of origin and destination. And if you're outside of that city fare or that location fare, there will be additional charges for you. But yeah, it'll be geographically priced.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. And again, following a little bit that train of thoughts, we have a question here. So what are the possible emerging technologies in the future of mobility?
That's a loaded question. This is my technology, right? My little smartphone. Smartphone here, you can see it. That's my technology. So anything that's going to be smartphone based, is it? So however you design, whatever you're designing, it's got to be carried in your pocket. However you decide to do it. So if I wanted to, so I use a transit app, right? You mentioned, so I can basically see where the buses are, right? And so I basically time my walk from my house to the bus stop, so that by the time I get to my bus stop, I'm not waiting, 45 minutes for my bus. I know when my bus is going to be there, and the buses are GPS tracked. So again, it kind of gets me to where I want to be. So that's a great advantage. I used to remember waiting for half hour, 45 minutes because I just missed the 165, and I'd late at night going home, and I had to wait 15 or 20 minutes because I missed it by 30 seconds. So yeah, so now I can basically plan my itinerary based on what is real-time GPS information about buses. Unfortunately, it doesn't tell me how full the bus is. The bus may be full, but it's coming along. Not going to stop for you because it's full. It's gone. So yeah, so there's a couple of tweaks we have to keep working on. The transit app, particularly in those heavily congested lanes that people tend to use on quite a bit. So the question would be one of looking at, so technology. My view is that for you and me, general users of transit, whatever it is you're going to do, you got to make it app based. You got to make it GPS based. You got to make it phones, Android, iOS, whatever it is, BlackBerry. Make them such that you're giving the ease of access to mobility on the basis of a smartphone. And you're going to have some parts of the population. Myself might not be included, but my brothers or my aunts who are in the 90s, they may have a bit of a problem with that. But I'll educate them eventually. But it really is. Apps are becoming ubiquitous. If you're going to do anything, do it on an app. And so that's where the user interface, the public interface, whatever you're designing in terms of technology, app based. And so I'm going to start my car in the middle of winter, app. I want to find out how fast, what time do I have to leave the house? to get on the REM to go to the downtown app. So there's a lot of things that are going to be done to basically integrate mobility networks into applications. The question then becomes in terms of the rest of mobility. How do I get stuff, moving? How do I get products into it? So we mentioned earlier about aviation, and aviation is going to be a big challenge. If I'm going to bring in aviation vehicles, drones as an example, or eVTOL, electrical vertical takeoff landing equipment, into commercial spaces, into downtown locations, that's a whole different world of air traffic management. Make sure they don't collide with each other, make sure that they operate safely, and to have corridors and everything set up for it. And so you need some new technology put in place to basically allow you to, in fact, manage that new mode of transportation very efficiently in a highly congested environment. And how do you do that? And how do you manage that? So the thinking is not done yet. The Europeans, the Asians, the Chinese, the Americans are still trying to come up with a way of doing it. So that airspace separation technology and airspace management technology is coming along so quickly. Integrated, you've got autonomous vehicles, truly autonomous. Are we ready for that? Okay. So who's going to call the shot? Who's going to decide in the car if I'm going to hit a person or I'm going to hit a car? Somebody's crossing the street. Who decides? Do I hit the pedestrian or do I hit the bus? As somebody's crossing the street in front of me. Life and death. Question. Who's going to decide? The car? Automatically? Don't know. So and that's just one example of what does autonomous really mean? And how do you do that? And how do you manage that? And how do you look at protecting the environment around you in terms of your own personal safety within the car, or the safety of individuals around you as you in fact operate your car autonomously in those environments around you. So a lot. So there's machine learning, there's artificial intelligence, there's assisted driving that's coming in place. It's going to be very, very important. And then the question of electrical vehicle charging. The one drawback you're going to have today is that you're going to charge those vehicles. How do you charge it? Do you plug them in? Do you in fact drive on the highway and get a charge while you're driving? So auto charging vehicles and the technology to support that type of technology. So the amount of technology that's either in the pipeline to support those concepts is going to, the pipeline is going to be filling up pretty quick. There's a lot of work being done, and it's not just by startups. It's the majors, the automotive guys are spending hundreds of billions of dollars trying to basically come up with tools and practices and technologies that they can use to in fact develop that technology much faster. So 2030 is not far. We've got 8.5 years to go, and half the world's vehicles are going to be electric by then. So there's a lot of challenges in terms of the supporting technology to make that a reality. But it's going to happen. It is going to happen. So, and there's going to be lots of technology being developed by both the automotive guys, the OEM guys, and that's only as long as we had the chips available for us to do that. Because guess what's happening today? Not enough chips being manufactured to support the vehicles. But try to buy a Ford 150, F-150 truck today, brand new. Try it. See what happens. See what type of delivery date they give you. They give you March 2022, if you're lucky. And why? Because we haven't got a supply chain that's able to, in fact, deliver the chips that are needed to support all of this technology coming down the pipe. So the technology is great, but we got to make sure that the infrastructure required to support the introduction of that technology does work. And so far, we're going through a major issue with chips as an example. And that's one just small element of the supply chain. But that one small piece of equipment, chips, is causing hundreds of billions of dollars, if not $1 trillion worth of disruption in the automotive industry. And that's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to introducing technology into any form of mobility. Interesting stuff. Yeah, Mike, and now you're right. I got a 2018 leased Volkswagen Passat. I've been paying leases for the last 3 years, and it leases up. And I had a buyout, I think, of about $5,000 for the vehicle. Right now, they're offering me $8,000 for a buyback. So I said, "Oh, we're making some money on the lease here," but that's that's short term. But that's something that you never think would happen. But that's the shortages of vehicles these days are such that it's crazy. And used car vehicles but a used F-150, used F-150, 3-year-old F-150 is now going for $5,000 above a 2022 F-150 that has got a potential date 6 months from now. So a used 2018 F-150 is being sold for more than a brand new 2022 F-150 because no supply.
You used to always say,
well, welcome to the world of mobility in the year 2022.
So always say that buying a new car is a bad investment, but actually, for the first time, it's not true anymore. But
yeah, go find it. Go find a new car.
Good luck.
Go find a new car.
I know we're already at the end, but there was just a last question here that I wanted to ask.
I'll keep it.
I feel you were kind of transitioning towards that. So, what companies, technologies, or business models should a business analyst focus on in the mobility service domain?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think there's no such thing as an organization that isn't going to be profiting from the evolution of mobility. I think that whether it's startups that are dealing with bus transportation, dealing with electrics, and trying to go into those organizations, whether they're existing, whether it's GM, Ford, Chrysler, Fiat, anybody, they're all looking for people to basically understand the evolution of mobility and how that evolution is going to change their business model. Service providers, the STM, ARTM, bus companies, transit companies are all looking for people that can understand the whole paradigm associated with mobility, not just how do I build a train or how do I do a train set or how do I maintain subway cars. It's really looking at the whole of mobility and trying to understand how it goes. So, there is no segment of industry that is attached to mobility that I would stay away from. You are looking at a bunch of organizations that are trying to come to grips with how do we have to change the way we do business in mobility and address the changing needs of our consumers, of our customers, of our clients. And I think that's where it gets really interesting to try to figure out where things like the STM. The STM has always bought buses, has always bought buying subway cars, but now they're getting hybrids, they're getting electrics, buses. But it's all about it's all about buses. But I'm saying it's not about buses. It's about people. It's about your customers. Understand what your customers want. Don't just keep taking technology and roll it over for the sake of technology's sake. Make sure that you understand what it is that your customers want, and that's where if there's anything that we that is evolving in terms of the world of mobility, is that we have to basically make sure that whoever goes through our program understands that equation. Yeah, so it talks about mobility as a human right, the ethics of mobility, understanding building things for what customers really want. And I think that's where the challenge is going to be, and that's where the biggest opportunities are going to be over the next little while.
Well, thank you again, John. We're going to wrap this up super quickly as we went a little bit over time, but it's okay. We always add a little buffer in that case. And again, thank you everyone for adding so many questions. I know there's still a lot of them that we didn't answer, but hey, the conversation is just getting started. I think this will definitely continue, and each question could have been a panel or a session by itself. So,
and we'll do, and I think that we will do this again. We will do it again. And yes, Vince, we're going to talk about F-150s one more time. Don't worry about it. So I'm not an F-150 fan, but electric maybe. I'm looking for my electric Mustang. So if you got a lead on an electric Mustang, I'll take it. But yeah, so we'll do this again. I think that, the mobility space, we decided to go a little bit beyond where aviation was and a bit more than supply chain and talk about mobility. But given the interest that we have today and our evolution of a mobility program at the School of Continuing Studies, definitely we'll do this again. And thank you, Naya, for setting it all up.
Well, thank you. And thank you also from people in the chat here sharing the love, also people on live saying thank you. And again, we're going to be sharing all of this with you so you can watch it again, share with your friends, and continue the conversation online. That would be fantastic. So, hey, thanks, John. We'll see you again. And everyone, see you at a future session. See you at a future session of Power Skills. Thank you. And I'm going to stop the recording so you can now be yourself.
Have a good one.